Family means forever, the banner read, stretched wide across my living room, anchored to the antique curtain rods I bought with my own bonus check last Christmas. There were people in my kitchen, in my guest room, on the stairs, kids playing tag in the hall, aunts I hadn't seen in years pouring wine in my marble-topped dining space like it was theirs. My name is Naomi, and from wherever you're watching this, stay with me. Have you ever walked into your own home and felt like a stranger at someone else's party? I had just flown back from a medical workshop in DC. I was supposed to return Sunday, but the conference ended early. So I came home Saturday night, exhausted, sleep-deprived, craving nothing but a long shower and silence. Instead, I walked into a full-blown family reunion, 102 people, by my quick count. And not a single one expected to see me. Not my sister, Grace, who stood in the kitchen laughing in a dress I'd loaned her and never got back. Not my parents, who toasted to the power of togetherness under a chandelier I installed. Not even my own godmother, who gave me a surprised half-wave like I was a hired caterer showing up too early. No one said my name. No one apologized. No one asked why I was standing frozen in the entryway of my own house, holding a suitcase and a boarding pass, watching them use my space, my tableware, my life, like I'd been erased. Naomi, Grace finally chirped, loud enough for heads to turn. You're home early. Then she added, laughing, You don't mind, do you? It just made more sense to host it here. More sense. Because I paid the mortgage. Because I had the space. Because I was the useful one. Never the valued one. I didn't make a scene. I didn't scream, cry, or throw people out. Instead, I wheeled my suitcase into my room, locked the door, and started planning. 2 weeks later, after one signature, one final meeting, and one beautiful digital transfer, I had 98 missed calls, and Grace was screaming into my voicemail like her life was crumbling. Because the house they used like a community center wasn't mine anymore. And I hadn't just moved out. I had done something that would make sure no one ever forgot whose name built that foundation in the first place. They thought I'd simmer in silence. They thought my absence from the family group chat, the birthday dinners, the last-minute holiday plans was a weakness, not a decision. But when I shut my bedroom door that night, the sound of my own family laughing beneath the roof they never thanked me for still echoing through the walls, I didn't rage. I calculated. Because that house, the one with the open-concept kitchen and custom wood floors, it was mine. Not metaphorically. Not emotionally. Legally. My name was the only one on the deed. They had celebrated under a banner that said, Family means forever, while making it very clear that my place in the family wasn't. So I spent the next few days doing 3 things. Documenting everything. Photos of the crowd. Furniture rearranged. Trash bins overflowing with champagne bottles I didn't authorize. My bathroom, used, flooded, towelless. Meeting with a realtor. Not to list the house. Not yet. But to prepare the papers, and more importantly, find a buyer who wouldn't blink. Finding a new home. Smaller. Cleaner. Private. Mine. Not big enough for 102 people. But more than enough for one woman who had finally reclaimed her peace. The day I quietly moved out, Grace was still tagging herself in throwback reunion photos. Captions like, Nothing like family in a place that feels like home to hearts. Except it wasn't her home. And she was about to find out just how temporary that comfort was. I waited exactly 2 weeks. Let the laundry pile up. Let the dishes crust. Let the reality of upkeep settle on their shoulders like dust no one was willing to clean. Then I signed the final sale. Cash buyer. No contingencies. Closing in 7 days. And that morning, as escrow was finalized, I left one thing behind. An envelope on the kitchen counter, addressed to Grace plus whoever else is still living here. Inside, a copy of the deed transfer, the realtor's contact, and a sticky note in my handwriting that said, Looks like forever just ended. Good luck finding a new banner. That evening, my phone exploded. 98 missed calls. And a voicemail from Grace that started with shrieking and ended with, You sold it. You sold the house. Where are we supposed to go? I pressed delete, then poured a glass of wine, sat in my quiet, rented apartment and smiled. Because they had used me as a structure. But I had always been the foundation.
And now?
They could feel what it's like to lose something they never valued, until it was gone. The next morning I got a text from Dad. No greeting. No punctuation. We need to talk. You've made a huge mistake. A mistake? Funny. That's what they said when I turned down a stable residency placement to build my private practice. When I chose preventive care over big hospital prestige. When I bought that house without consulting the family. They only called it a mistake when it no longer benefited them.
I didn't reply.
I didn't have to. Because just hours later, my realtor called to confirm the buyers were walking the property. The same living room where I used to be asked to take everyone's coats? Now filled with architects sketching plans for a wellness retreat. The house was becoming a clinic. My clinic. I was leasing it back through a professional partnership. Same address, new purpose. No more potluck parties, no more sticky-fingered kids drawing on my walls. Just treatment rooms, calm, and me. Grace didn't take it well. She showed up outside my new place that evening, bangs wild, phone in one hand, iced coffee in the other like it might cool her rage. Naomi, what the hell? You just gave our family home away? What about tradition? What about holidays? I looked her in the eye. You mean the holidays I wasn't invited to? Or the ones where I came late, so you wouldn't have to rearrange seating? She scoffed. You're being dramatic.
No.
I'm being deliberate. There's a difference. She tried guilt next. Dad's heartbroken. Mom's humiliated. Do you know how this makes us look? I smiled. Like people who should have thought twice before treating me like a backup generator. Then I handed her a printed copy of the check. Not to flaunt it, to make it real. Congratulations, I said. Your reunion bought me a full medical wing and a life without crumbs. She stared at it like it might burn her fingers. Where are we supposed to go now? She whispered. Anywhere that doesn't have my name on the mailbox. She left in silence. Not because she ran out of words, but because there was nothing left she could say that would erase what she'd done. That night, I opened my calendar. First appointment in the new space. A single mother suffering burnout. Second, a teen girl with chronic fatigue, misdiagnosed too many times. Third, a retired nurse with no one to advocate for her care. I smiled. Because, while they mourned the loss of a party house, I was turning it into a place that actually heals. By the end of the week, the group chat I was never part of had turned into a full-blown crisis thread. How could Naomi do this? Where will we host Thanksgiving now? Did anyone get copies of Grandma's recipe binder before she changed the locks? I didn't read the messages directly. They came to me through screenshots from my cousin Layla, the only one who ever asked, "Hey, do you actually want to come?" instead of, "Why didn't you show up again?" She sent me one message that stood out more than the rest. They're acting like you burned down the house. But all you did was stop setting the table.
Exactly.
Because I've been hosting without being welcomed for years. They loved the space I created, the warmth, the comfort, but never the person behind it. Not when I skipped med school. Not when I launched my own integrative care practice. Not when I said, I'd rather do it differently, instead of, yes, Mom. To them, I was always the fragile one. The sensitive daughter. The overreacting sister. Until the deed said otherwise. Until their favorite party house had a new plaque by the gate. Shoreline Integrative Center. Founded by Dr. Naomi Reyes. And that plaque? It broke the illusion. Because the moment my name wasn't silent, it was threatening. I got one last email from Mom. No, dear. No love. Just. You've alienated yourself from everyone. You might own the walls, Naomi, but you've torn down the family. I stared at the line for a long time. Then I wrote back. You built a family where I was useful, but never valued. You expected me to carry everyone, and when I quietly stepped away, you called it betrayal. It's not. It's a boundary. If that tears something down, maybe it was never that strong to begin with. I didn't alienate myself. I just stopped offering free space in a home where I wasn't invited to sit. She never replied. That weekend, I opened the clinic doors to our first official clients. Mothers, daughters, people who had been dismissed by louder rooms, people who just wanted someone to listen. And in the quiet, healing hum of my new space, I thought, they had a chance to include me. They chose to use me instead. And now, they were standing on the curb outside a house they called forever, holding folding chairs and memories, while I stepped into a future they were never meant to own. The next major holiday came fast, Thanksgiving. Every year, my house had hosted it. Not because they asked, but because it was convenient. More room, better oven, enough chairs. Grace used to text me 2 days before. Hey, can you do the stuffing again? Yours is just less soggy than Mom's. No invite, just expectation. I was the venue, the unpaid planner, the cleanup crew. And they'd sit there, grinning, complimenting the centerpiece I made, then switching to a new topic whenever I spoke. But this year the gate code was changed. And my new tenant? A woman named Dr. Hadley, who ran prenatal care programs and didn't take kindly to surprise doorbell rings from emotional aunts with store-bought pies. At 3:48 p.m., Grace posted a photo. 10 of them, cramped in a tiny condo kitchen, folding chairs lined up like it was a job interview. The caption read, "Family isn't about where you are, it's about who shows up. Red heart, #thankful. Except I did show up. For years. I showed up when Dad was recovering from his heart surgery, and no one else remembered the medication chart. I showed up when Mom forgot to get the heater fixed in winter, and I paid for it quietly. I showed up when Grace couldn't make rent and called me sobbing at 1:30 a.m., and I zelled her $1,200 before she even asked. But I never got a plate, never got a speech, never even got a chair with my name on it. So this year, I set a new table. Not figuratively.
Literally.
At Shoreline Integrative Center, we hosted our first community Thanksgiving. We opened the clinic lounge, catered a meal, and invited single mothers, underpaid caretakers, and women who didn't have real family but had real hearts. There were tears. There was dancing. There were toasts that said thank you with sincerity, not obligation. Mid-meal, an older woman stood up and looked straight at me. "You gave us a place to be seen," she said. "That's not family by blood. That's family by choice." The room clapped, and I realized this was home. Not the house I sold, not the DNA I left behind, but the table where I no longer had to shrink to fit. Later that night, I checked my phone. No missed calls. Just one message from Layla, my cousin. "They still don't get it. But I do. You built something real. I'm proud of you." I looked around, at the full plates, the full hearts, and I thought, they can keep their banner. Because forever doesn't mean anything when it only applies to the ones they choose.
But now?
I choose. By December, the family had a new strategy. Rewrite the past fast. Grace posted a carousel of old photos. Us in matching sweaters. Me, age 10, carving turkey while the adults drank wine. Caption: "Through ups and downs, we've always been together. That's what matters. Red heart, #family is everything." Except no. We weren't always together. They were always together. I was the one behind the camera. The one washing dishes alone. The one sleeping on the pull-out sofa because Grace called the guest room first. This wasn't nostalgia. It was a cover-up. And I wasn't going to let it stand. But I also wasn't going to fight. I didn't need to. Because the clinic, it was growing fast. We were booked solid into March. 2 new physicians joined our team. And a local reporter asked to do a human interest feature called Healing Her Way. I agreed. But on one condition. I told the truth. No glossing. No soft focus version of what happened. Just the raw, simple truth. I came home from a medical workshop and found 102 people hosting a party under my roof. A party I was never invited to. That's when I realized, sometimes, blood doesn't mean belonging. The article went viral. I got emails from women across the country. Some crying.
Some angry.
All of them saying the same thing. "Thank you for saying it. I thought I was the only one." But the best part? We got a letter, handwritten, from a former nurse practitioner named Clarice. She wrote, "When I was pushed out of my family for choosing hospice work over private hospitals, I thought I'd die invisible. But seeing your clinic, seeing how you turned pain into structure, I finally believe there's value in what I did." We hired her the next week, not because her story broke our hearts, but because her story built them. Meanwhile, the group chat exploded again. Someone had sent the article to Mom. She didn't call, didn't message, just updated her Facebook bio from proud mother of two to nothing. Erased me again. But this time, it didn't hurt, because what they don't understand is this. You can rewrite the photo captions, crop out the hard moments, pretend everyone smiled, but real legacy is in the names whispered by the people you helped when no one else showed up. And those stories? They can't erase them. Not from the walls of my clinic, not from the mouths of my patients, and not from the one story I finally wrote for myself. New Year's Eve. The one night my parents insisted was sacred tradition. Matching outfits. Dad's weird lentil soup. Champagne flutes none of us liked. Every year, I'd stand in the kitchen slicing fruit for a punch I wasn't allowed to pour because Grace is better at the aesthetic stuff. And every year, at exactly 12:01 a.m., I'd be the one holding the camera, not the one in the photo. But this year, no invitation came. Not even a forwarded link to the family group Zoom. And still, I smiled. Because while they were prepping for confetti and performance, I was prepping for purpose. I was co-hosting a midnight circle at the clinic, a quiet gathering of women and caretakers who had no one else to count the clock down with. Some were patients. Some were single. Some were just tired of pretending they felt loved in places that only tolerated them. We sat in a circle. No fireworks. Just warmth. Candles. Real stories. A teacher shared how her own brother took over her house after she cared for their dying mother. A mother admitted her daughter hadn't spoken to her in 6 years because she didn't choose the right man. And then they looked at me. "What about you, Dr. Reyes?" one asked gently. "What did you leave behind this year?" I took a breath. "An address," I said. "And a version of myself who waited too long for someone to save her a seat." They nodded. Not in sympathy, in understanding. Because we all knew what it felt like to be present in everyone else's life, but absent from our own. At midnight, we rang in the new year together, not with noise, but with peace. Across town, Grace posted a reel. Matching dresses. Party horns. Caption: "The ones who matter are always here, kiss mark sparkles." Still trying to speak to me through exclusion. But I didn't feel hurt. I felt proof that I no longer needed their invitations to feel welcome. Because I'd made my own space, one that never asked people to shrink. A space that didn't care about optics, only truth. And truthfully, this was the first New Year's I hadn't felt alone. Because when you stop begging for connection and start building community, you stop being erased. You become unmissable. 3 months later, I received a thick white envelope, handwritten, from Mom. Inside, a long letter, sloppy cursive, pages of reflections and justifications. "We didn't mean to hurt you. You've always been more independent. We thought you preferred it. You were busy. We didn't want to burden you with hosting. We made mistakes, but we're still your family. Still asking me to fold myself back into a shape that made them comfortable. Still pretending it was a misunderstanding, not a pattern. Still trying to return to a home they burned while I was away, thinking I wouldn't smell the smoke when I came back." The last page had a bold ask: "Come to Grace's baby shower. It won't be the same without you. She misses you." I didn't attend. Instead, I hosted a clinic event that weekend. A wellness day for first-time mothers without support systems. We offered free prenatal checkups, counseling circles, and baby essentials. One of the women pulled me aside and whispered, "Thank you. I haven't felt like someone cared in a long time." I smiled. "You're not alone anymore." Later, while cleaning up, I saw a text from Layla. "Grace is crying. Your absence is louder than any gift." She meant it as guilt, but I took it as truth. Because sometimes the greatest power isn't in slamming a door, it's in never returning to the one you were never truly welcome in. 2 days later, a photo went up on Grace's socials. Her in a pastel dress, surrounded by baby balloons, fake smiles, and that same old banner. Family means forever. Except the house in the background wasn't mine. They'd rented a venue this time. Because the real home? The one they once claimed with their wine glasses and matching shirts? That home had walls now. Standards.
Lux.
It wasn't for them anymore. Because family, that only sees your worth when you're useful, isn't forever. But what I built
Is.
Shoreline Integrative was now in its second phase of expansion. A second clinic. A scholarship fund. A waiting list of women who used to feel as invisible as I did in my own dining room.
And me?
I was no longer asking to be seen. I was the spotlight now. So, when people say, "You sold your childhood home," I say,
No.
I reclaimed it. I turned it into something they could never sit in again.
Because it finally reflected me.
The fluorescent lights above me were buzzing, faint and rhythmic, almost like a warning siren that had given up screaming. My left arm had gone limp, and I couldn't feel the tips of my fingers. My head felt like it had been split open with something cold and heavy. The room spun slowly, nauseatingly. "Can you tell me your name?" a nurse asked, leaning over me. Anna, I managed to whisper. "Please, can you call my parents?" She nodded and disappeared behind a curtain. Minutes passed. Then hours. Nobody came. I tried again. My hands trembled as I clutched the phone. I called Mom first, straight to voicemail. Then Dad, nothing. I sent a message to our family group chat. "I'm in ER. Something's wrong. Please come. Please." At first, I thought maybe they hadn't seen it. Maybe they were asleep.
Busy.
Then the notification popped up. "Mom's typing." Finally. Relief washed over me. Until I read it. "Don't scare us like that. Mark is having a full-blown meltdown over this ticket. We're with him. Don't call in a panic if you're not dying." I stared at the screen, heart thudding. I was in a panic. And I was dying. Maybe not in the Hollywood dramatic sense. But something was seriously wrong with my body. My speech was slurred. My limbs were failing. The doctor said the next few hours were critical. But all they saw was drama. And worse, inconvenience. Later, I found out they were with Mark at the DMV, arguing over a suspended license because he'd blown off 3 court dates. When they finally arrived, sometime past 3 a.m., I had already been through a CT scan and a spinal tap. Mom walked in, hair perfectly straightened, holding a lukewarm coffee. "Okay," she exhaled. "What now?" Dad followed behind her, looking irritated. "We left Mark mid-crisis, you know that, right?" I was lying on the hospital bed with monitors attached to my chest, an oxygen line in my nose, and a nurse adjusting my four. I opened my mouth to speak, but nothing came out. Just air. "Is this a migraine thing again?" Mom asked. "You get these episodes when you're stressed." The nurse glanced at her and said firmly, "Actually, we're testing for a TIA. It's a kind of mini-stroke." Mom blinked. But she's only 28. The nurse gave a tight smile. "Strokes don't check ID." They stayed for exactly 12 minutes. They didn't ask if I was okay.
Didn't touch my hand.
Didn't even sign the visitor log. I watched them leave like they were stepping out of a restaurant they didn't enjoy. And in that moment, quiet, cold, and hooked to machines, I realized something far heavier than any diagnosis. I was never the priority. They say the middle child is often forgotten. But I wasn't even the middle. I was the only daughter. And somehow, still invisible. Mark was the golden boy from the moment he entered the world, red-faced and howling like he owned the house. Our parents doted on him like he was some divine miracle, the answer to a prayer none of us remembered saying. He broke things, I got blamed. He lied, I got punished for not guiding him better. He came home drunk at 17 and they said, "Boys will be boys." When I cried because he called me names or slammed my door in my face, I was told, "Don't be dramatic, Anna. You know how Mark is. Why do you always make things harder?" I learned very young that in our house, attention was currency. And I was broke. I once brought home a certificate for winning the state writing competition. My mom glanced at it and said, "That's nice, sweetie. Can you help your brother with his math homework now? He's drowning." Mark failed math 3 times. I stayed up with him for hours to help him pass on the 4th. He barely thanked me. They bought him a new phone. I got straight A's. They forgot to attend the awards ceremony. Even when I got into college, on scholarship, they barely looked up from their bills. Mark, meanwhile, got into a local community college, dropped out twice, and then racked up thousands in speeding tickets. Each time, Dad covered it. Mom would say, "He's just struggling to find his path. Be patient with him." I wasn't allowed to struggle. I worked 3 jobs to afford textbooks and rent. I remember calling home once from a bathroom stall at work after my car battery died. Dad said, "That's life. Figure it out." A week later, Mark totaled his car, and they co-signed for a new one. When I once hinted at how unfair things felt, Mom snapped, "Don't make this a competition. We've supported you both equally." Equally. That word still stings. Support wasn't the problem. Belief was. Mark was a project. A lost cause they loved rescuing. I was expected to be fine on my own. And when I wasn't, I was called weak. I stopped asking for help. I learned how to stitch myself back together with silence. They never noticed the bleeding, just the fact that I didn't stain the floor. Even in moments I should have been proud of, should have been seen, I felt like wallpaper in my own life. The day I got promoted at work, I texted our family group. Mom replied with a thumbs up emoji. Mark sent a meme that had nothing to do with me. That was all. Even on my best days, I was barely noticeable. The hospital discharged me 2 days later. I walked out slower than I went in, lightheaded, weak, and trailing a headache that felt like a nail buried deep in my skull. They diagnosed it as a TIA, a transient ischemic attack. A warning shot from my brain. The kind that tells you, next time, you might not wake up. I sent the discharge papers in the family group chat, just to make things clear. Mom replied, "Glad it wasn't anything serious. You're fine now, right?" Followed by the way, Mark needs help with his court fine. Can you lend him $600? No, how are you feeling? No, do you need anything? Just a quick pivot from my stroke scare to Mark's meltdown. When I didn't reply right away, my dad called. "Anna," he said like he was already tired, "your mom's worried you're mad again." "I'm not mad," I said. "I just had a stroke. Kind of takes up space in my head." He chuckled. "Come on. You didn't have a real stroke. They said it wasn't that serious, right?" There it was. That word again. Serious. Unless I came in bleeding from every pore or rolled in on fire, nothing I went through ever registered on their radar. The week that followed was full of tight smiles and tight chests. I couldn't concentrate. Lights were too bright, sounds too sharp. I found myself crying in the shower, overwhelmed by nothing and everything. My doctor recommended short-term therapy. When I told my mom, she said, "Just go outside and get some sun. That helps me when I feel low." I said, "It's not a mood swing, Mom. It's trauma." She rolled her eyes. "You always exaggerate." Mark, meanwhile, had no such trouble getting sympathy. He called me a few days later. "I know you're dealing with stuff," he said in that voice he uses when he wants something, "but if you could just float me that $600, I'd really appreciate it." "I can't, Mark. But it's just money. You make good money now, don't you? I just got out of the hospital. And you lived. So we're good, right?" That word again. Good. He hung up without saying goodbye. 3 days later, my parents showed up at my apartment. My dad stood in my doorway with a plastic grocery bag of oranges and a tight-lipped smile. "We thought we'd drop in," he said. "We figured you're probably still upset." I let them in, mostly because I didn't have the energy to argue. They sat at my table, complimented the curtains, and then dove right into Mark's situation. His license got suspended. "He might lose his job," Mom said, fiddling with her phone. "And he's talking about therapy now, which is good," Dad added, "but those sessions aren't cheap." I stared at them, wondering if they had even once sat down to talk about my recovery.
About my brain.
About how terrified I still was to sleep at night. Instead, I heard all about Mark's job, Mark's car, Mark's fines, Mark's struggle. And then, in the middle of a dry piece of store-bought pie, my father dropped the line that broke whatever part of me still hoped. At least you're not on trial like your brother. That was the moment I finally saw the truth, whole and bare. I could disappear off the face of the earth. They'd only notice when Mark needed something I used to give. I didn't scream. I didn't confront. I just started writing things down. Every time my mother made a snide remark about me, hoarding money, while Mark struggled, I noted it. Every phone call from Mark, every guilt-laced text message, every backhanded compliment, saved, screenshotted, cataloged. I became quiet. Not defeated, strategic. I smiled through dinners. I sent thank you texts for their visits. I even nodded politely when my dad said, "You really should think about helping your brother with rent next month. He's drowning." But inside, I was mapping an escape. I started with my finances. I'd always been careful with money. Years of scraping by through college taught me that. But something didn't sit right when I saw a small loan flag on my credit report. I hadn't applied for anything. I called my bank. They confirmed it. A loan taken out in my name. From a joint account I'd opened years ago, when I was still living at home and didn't know better. One my parents still had access to. And guess who the loan was for?
Mark.
The address? My parent house. I didn't cry.
I didn't yell.
I just opened a new account that same night. Transferred every cent I could. Then I froze the old one. I changed my passwords. I updated security questions. I removed them from every emergency contact list, every financial file, every traceable tie they could use. I reached out to Danielle, a college friend who'd become a family lawyer. We met for coffee and I laid it out. The medical neglect, the identity abuse, the emotional manipulation. She didn't interrupt once. When I finished, she leaned back, sighed, and said, "Anna, you're not being dramatic. You're being used. And if you're ready, I can help you cut the cord completely." I nodded. I wasn't just ready. I was done. We went through every document. She helped me draft a cease and desist for future credit use. Showed me how to flag my credit for fraud protection. And just like that, brick by brick, I began building a fortress, silent and strong. I didn't make a scene. I didn't announce anything. I still answered their calls. I still smiled on FaceTime. I even let Mark rant about his new parking ticket without saying a word. But while they talked, I watched the walls go up around me.
Safe. Secure.
Untouchable. Because here's the truth. That night in the hospital when my body nearly gave out, I thought it was the beginning of the end. But maybe it was something else. Maybe, in that sterile white room, with needles in my veins and silence on the other end of the phone, something inside me shifted. If I wasn't dying that night, maybe I was being reborn. The first bang was silent. I filed the fraud report online. It took 20 minutes. I uploaded screenshots, confirmed identity theft, and flagged my credit profile for legal protection. The bank froze the account. The one they used behind my back. The one I funded. Then came the rest. I canceled the automatic payments I'd been making for my parents' utilities, the ones they never asked me for but always expected. The subscriptions I paid because your father doesn't understand tech stuff. I emailed our family accountant and removed myself from any shared estate documents. I wasn't going to be the unpaid secretary anymore. By the time they noticed, the foundation had already cracked. It was Mark who hit the wall first. He applied for a loan, a used car deal he thought he could finesse. He'd used my name before, probably figured he still could. Except this time, the bank said no. Red flag. Frozen file. Application denied. He called me, voice already raised. "What the hell, Anna? You messed with something, didn't you?" "I'm sorry," I said sweetly. "My loan got flagged. I couldn't even get pre-approved. Did you lock something down?" "Maybe you should focus on your meltdown," I said, echoing our mom's exact words to me in the ER. "You're not dying, right?"
Click.
5 minutes later, Dad called. "Why is everything frozen?" Why is your name red flagged? The accountant said you pulled a state access. What's going on? I'm just organizing my life, I said calmly. For God's sake, Anna, you could have at least told us. Oh, like the loan you took in my name? That kind of conversation. Silence. Then, that was for Mark. He needed it. I needed you. In the hospital. Remember?
They didn't reply, and I was done waiting for them to try.
Mom sent a long text thread the next day. Paragraphs of vague guilt, backhanded apologies, and emotional blackmail. You know, we've always relied on you. You've always been the strong one. Don't abandon us now. Not when your brother's struggling the most. That last line made me laugh. I'd been dying in a hospital bed while they were filling out his DMV paperwork.
And now?
Now they were scrambling, not because they missed me, but because they'd lost their personal assistant. No more free tax prep. No more password resets. No more bank transfers in the middle of the night. I stopped answering their calls. I muted the group chat. I let them spiral. Mark sent one last voice message. It was full of yelling, accusations, and one thing that made me pause. You've always been bitter. I was the favorite. Well, guess what? Even if you walk away, they'll still pick me. Maybe. But at least now I was done picking them. I listened to the message again, then deleted it. I stood in the middle of my apartment, surrounded by silence, not emptiness.
Peace.
I picked up my phone, stared at the contact list with Mom, Dad, and Mark at the top. I didn't block them. I didn't reply. I just whispered to myself, if you didn't see me then don't look for me now. The text came at 2:14 a.m. Mark's been arrested. He was driving on a suspended license. Please, Anna. We don't know what to do. I read it twice. First from Mom, then again from Dad. Identical messages, sent minutes apart. The silence I had once feared now protected me like armor. Mark had been pulled over for running a red light. The cop ran his ID and found the suspension flag, multiple unpaid tickets, a missed court appearance, and a bench warrant. They cuffed him on the spot. And just like that, the golden boy finally cracked. No one came to his rescue. Mom and Dad called everyone they could. Old friends, cousins, even a church acquaintance who'd once been a paralegal. Nobody wanted to touch it. So they turned to the one person they thought would never say no.
Me.
Anna, Mom pleaded over voicemail. You've always been the responsible one. Please, just help us navigate this. We don't know how to talk to lawyers. He could lose everything. He made mistakes, Dad added in his own message. But he's still your brother. We're still your parents. Family is forever. Funny, that phrase. Family is forever. Where was that slogan when I was lying in a hospital bed, terrified and alone, trying to remember how to spell my name during a stroke assessment? Where was that when they handed over my credit like it was spare change?
I didn't respond.
Not with words. Not with rage. Just distance. A new number. A new email. The final accounts disconnected. They weren't used to silence from me. Not used to not having access. I was always the bridge. The fixer. The one who answered at midnight and paid bills just for now. But now the bridge was burned. And Mark was drowning. Mom sent photos next. One of Mark in an orange jumpsuit, looking pale and stunned. Another of some legal document she clearly didn't understand, begging me to explain it. I said nothing.
Dad tried logic.
You've made your point, but you can't really turn your back on us forever. That's not who you are. He was wrong. This was who I was. Someone who finally understood the difference between being useful and being loved. Someone who knew that being their lifeline had nearly cost her own. Let them handle the chaos. The court dates. The fines. The same messes they once expected me to clean with a smile. Let Mark fall. He'd been held up for far too long by hands that never belonged to him. And let my parents finally face the truth. The daughter they once dismissed as too sensitive was no longer within reach. They finally noticed I was gone. But only because everything was falling apart. The first time I walked into therapy, I couldn't look the counselor in the eyes. Not because I was ashamed, but because I didn't know how to explain what wasn't there, what had never been there. Love, yes, but always with conditions.
Support, yes,
But only if I stayed silent. Presence, yes, but only when it didn't interfere with Mark's latest crisis. It took months, but eventually I stopped asking why they treated me the way they did. And started asking, why did I let them? That question was heavier, but it led me somewhere real. I joined a support group for daughters of narcissistic families. Women who looked just like me, composed on the outside, quietly breaking on the inside. One by one, we told our stories. And for the first time, mine didn't feel too much. It just felt true. I got promoted at work, moved into a team lead position. Suddenly, the people around me listened when I spoke. They asked for my opinion. They valued my boundaries. It felt foreign and beautiful. A few months later, I packed up my apartment and moved to a new city. No fanfare, no family goodbye. Just me, a clean lease, and silence that no longer felt empty, but earned. In that city, I built a life with intention. I planted herbs on my windowsill. I joined a yoga class where no one asked me to explain my bruises because now there weren't any. And one night, while scrolling through Reddit of all places, I found a thread titled, Daughters Who Raised Themselves. I read every comment. Then I opened a blank document. And I started writing. Not to blame, not to shame, just to tell the truth. That document became a blog. That blog grew. Women wrote to me, strangers who called me a mirror or the voice I never had. I never named names. I never told dirty secrets. I didn't need to. The power wasn't in revenge. It was in reclaiming myself. A few months in, I was asked to speak on a podcast. The host introduced me as a brave advocate for daughters who go unheard. I smiled. She meant well. But when she asked me, live on air, do you think you're brave for walking away from your family? I paused. Then I said, brave?
no.
Just free. I think there's a difference. I don't check my old group chats anymore. The silence that used to feel like punishment is now my peace. Sometimes I wonder what Mark's doing. If my parents still argue over dinner about how I turned cold. But those are just thoughts. Passing. Weightless. Because now, my life is mine. No guilt. No begging to be seen. No proving my worth to people who never questioned his. Just mornings where I wake up without dread. Just laughter that doesn't need permission. Just me, healing, whole, and finally,
free.
It had been 3 years. 3 quiet, steady, healing years. When the call came, I didn't recognize the number. But something in me knew. Anna. My mother's voice trembled through the speaker. Pleased it's your brother. He's in jail again. It's bad this time. She didn't ask how I was. She didn't ask if it was a good time. She just needed. I didn't answer right away. I told her I'd think about it. Then I stared at the phone for a long time. I don't know why I went. Closure, maybe. Maybe curiosity. Or maybe part of me wanted to see it for myself. The mess they made without me. Their house looked smaller than I remembered.
Worn.
The yard unkempt. The porch light flickering like a dying breath. Mom opened the door. She looked older. Not in the graceful, silver hair and sunlight way. Older like something had been eaten from the inside out. Dad didn't say a word when I walked in. Just gave a stiff nod, like I was the mailman. They sat me down. Told me Mark had violated parole. Something about theft, resisting arrest, court fines unpaid for months. He might face real prison time this round. I listened. I didn't ask for details. Finally, Mom said, her voice cracking. We don't know what to do. We thought maybe you could help, talk to someone, maybe get him into a program. You always knew how to fix things. I looked at her. This woman who once told me not to call in a panic unless I was dying. This woman who chose a parking ticket over her daughter's stroke. I took a breath.
And said, gently,
I needed you too, and you never came. She flinched like I'd slapped her. Dad looked away. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just stood. I pulled a small letter from my purse and placed it on the table. The envelope had no name, just the words, that night. Inside was everything I never got to say. The panic, the silence, the truth. I didn't leave a return address. As I stepped outside, the sun broke through the clouds. It felt warm, not like fire but like freedom. I didn't look back. Somewhere behind me, the ghosts of a family that never saw me finally held the mirror up to themselves. And I walked forward, into the light, because they thought my pain was small, that I'd cry, rest, and come running back. But pain ignored turns into power. And I used mine to walk away.